looking at any form of regulation for psychedelic therapy, that it is absolutely needed. And I said it earlier, but it is absolutely needed in order to be able to provide that comfort and quality of life, because it's not just for the patient, it's for the family.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Mushroom Podcast. Today on the show, we have Michael Kydd. He is an independent consultant working with various psychedelic companies, helping them navigate the complex world of government relations. He has about 25 years experience working with government and private companies, and his story about why he is now working in psychedelics is the most interesting piece. So Michael and I both share the commonality of losing our mothers to aggressive cancer earlier in our lives. And this is the driving force behind his work. And honestly, it's a huge force for me doing this work as well, of helping as many people as possible gain access to psilocybin therapy for end-of-life distress. Michael even went as far as obtaining his mother's medical records during her illness to get a better understanding of what she experienced, and it helped him immensely in his healing journey. So this is a very personal conversation. I think it's a really important one, and I really hope you guys get a lot of value out of this one and enjoy. All right, here we are. Michael Kydd, thanks for joining us today. I'm so excited for this conversation. I know we're going to dive deep into some pretty heavy issues that we have a similar experience, life experience in dealing with, and so I just really appreciate you coming on to talk about this. And tell us a little bit about. Oh, your dog's already popped up. I love it.
You'll pop in
tell
every
us
once
a little.
in a while. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is Clem,
tell us.
everybody. Say hi to Clem.
Clem,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us too.
All right.
But so you're currently working in the psychedelic industry, and you got a history in media relations, government relations, maybe a master of relationship management. Would that be accurate to say?
I wouldn't say I'm a master, but it's maybe I'm maybe a new term I could call myself is a professional mutt. I've kind of done a lot of things over the last 25 plus years. And I know we're going to get into this a bit more, Brett, but after my mother passed away in 1992, I was kind of lost, so I needed to find something. And what I ended up doing was committing myself to a lot of volunteer work, and which led to getting a job working in security of all things, and then starting to rebuild my life after that grief, to knowing that I wanted to pursue post-secondary education. So I went to McMaster University, and I lucked out getting a job in inpatient psychiatry and outpatient psychiatry at McMaster University Medical Center, which really spurred my passion for understanding people, the things they do and why they do them. So I did that for likely 5 years, and worked. Moved to Nova Scotia in 2003 after I met my wife, and decided to pursue a degree in public relations. And then right from my degree, finishing my degree, I ended up going right into politics and worked in politics for close to 15 years in public affairs and regulatory affairs, and kind of the rest is history. But it's been a real fun opportunity, professional opportunity to learn so much from so many good people, and to take that skill set and apply it to what I'm doing today.
Yeah. So, in losing your mother back in 1992, what was it about the loss of that relationship that drove you into wanting to really understand people and work with people?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I was 17 at the time, so this was in 1991. I was 17 at the time. I just turned 17, and I was very close with my mother. She was 39 years old when she was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic lung cancer, and we were very close. She was tough. She was tough, and for those who end up watching this, who may know me, will probably be able to attest to that. But I played minor hockey at the AAA level, and then into junior hockey, and she was at every game. She didn't miss anything. So, I think just the natural bond any son has with their mother is a powerful thing in understanding relationships as you grow, whether that's with your partner, whether you have children of your own. You learn so much from your mother. They're the primary caregivers from birth right through, and especially in those primary years of brain development and overall development between the ages of birth and 5 years old. So, that's the thing that I'm really I think a lot about is her passing, and how much it really made me want to get to know people and understand people and empathize with people who are either going through a similar situation or just having a hard day. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned, and why I think her passing so many years ago, 30 years ago now, has been instrumental in helping me understand people.
Right. Yeah, it's probably the biggest loss we can go through of a close relationship in our life, right? Like that connection that everyone has with their mother, that just goes back to spending those 9 months, those first 9 months of your real existence inside of them, and something through the birthing process too, right? Like there's a crazy connection, and this is something that I've worked with myself. I'd share with you my psychedelic experience too, of my intention being on exploring the relationship with my mom, who passed away when I was 25, so not long after the age that you experienced that same loss. And you can really feel it in a psychedelic experience, that connection back to the roots, right, of like where the origination of us as human beings began.
Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't gone on my journey yet. Um, a lot of that trauma is still very, very entrenched in who I am as a person. There's anger, there's still grief. A lot of that has subsided, but it comes and goes still, because for example, I'll be at my son or my daughter's hockey game, and uh, I'll look over at the stands, and I would know just instinctively where my mother would be sitting, where my father would be sitting, and it brings you back to that moment of when they used to be there for you. They sacrificed everything for you, and my mother did. She sacrificed everything so that I could have a decent upbringing for the years that we were connected, as you said, in utero right through to birth, and the 17 years after. But so yeah, I think there's always part of us that, as much as we deal with the trauma of losing someone, like our mothers, there's there's the ability to always reflect and introspectively look at how much they influenced your lives in all the years that go by without them.
Yeah, and so now your current work with as a relations consultant with various psychedelic companies that you're now working with. One big focus I think you shared with me is working with companies with a focus on end of life anxiety. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason, Brett, why I pivoted my business almost 2 years ago, right into this space. I had known nothing about psychedelics other than consuming psilocybin mushrooms once when I was 19, and that's a funny story. I was at my friend's party, and I actually thought I was a hamster. I I ran upstairs, and these were the days of the parties where everybody would come in with their jackets on and throw them in the bedroom. So there was about 40 or 50 jackets on the bed, and I was pretending that it was a nest. So, anyways, that was my only experience I've had with psilocybin. But Now that I've learned so much more about the therapeutic impact that it has in treating end of life distress, palliative discomfort, all these different things that are so organically emotional. Because often when we think of end of life, we think of the pain, the physical pain that people suffer, and they do.
Yeah.
I've seen it with my friends, I've seen it with my mother, and I've seen it with all of my family. But I think we've also, as a society, done a great job over the last decade of really putting an emphasis on mental health, and that is where I think, psychedelics, and I think I speak for a lot of people, will have a profound and deep impact on how we move forward in that therapy to help the mind and heal the mind, even as we're passing through to the end of our journeys.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've had a few conversations now with people. Um, yeah, I think they're tough conversations to have and listen to, right? When been through the experience that we've both been through of watching both of our mothers just being taken away really quickly and being gripped with fear and anxiety and just not really knowing what's coming next, not knowing what to do, how to act in those last few months when you're like facing your mortality. Uh, and it's that same story. People learn how to live if they only have a couple months left or weeks or whatever it is. They
Yeah.
all of a sudden have this perspective of how they want to share their time with people, and the anxiety and stress melts away, and it's an incredible thing to watch someone go through. And
Yeah.
I know that we both share this, right? As like, because we went through that and we saw the other side of it where there wasn't the option for psychedelic assisted psychotherapy for end of life distress. Like, we want to fight to have people have access to that when they need it, especially ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's for me, that's always been my catalyst or my motivation is to be a steward, to be an ambassador of some sort. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychedelic researcher. You'll never see me in a science lab building compounds or trying to isolate different compounds. But I think the skills that I have outside of the scientific realm, which are so important, um, are good communication skills and the ability to bring the right people to the table to have discussions with, say, Health Canada, with the health minister, and different territorial, provincial, or even state governments, as I've been able to do over the last year and a half. So, I think we're kind of at that point in time where people are asking more questions about psychedelics and understanding more. I've always said that those who are suffering end of life anxiety and palliative anxiety certainly deserve to have that peace. There's absolutely no reason in the world that those who are facing primordial dread and fear should not have access to psilocybin therapy. There's no reason for it. And I know Health Canada knows that. I know there are a lot of people who work at Health Canada who are very passionate about this, and they get it and they understand it. But these things do take time, and that's the part where I think my skill set helps, is helping others who are suffering understand that um, while they may not have all that time, we have to continue to fight and put this into perspective so that everybody understands, from the political side right through to the actual social side.
Yeah, and you're honest about your experience too. Like, you haven't gone through a psilocybin aside from your one session experience, let's
We'll
call
call
it,
we'll call it in
where you
my
turned into a
first.
hamster.
Yeah, my first session. No, but and I will be going through
Yeah.
that in the next few weeks,
Hmm.
and I'm very excited for it. One of the reasons I have held off is because I am on escitalopram,
Yeah.
and that is again related to post-traumatic stress that I've had since my mother's death. I haven't slept in close to 30 years,
Wow.
um, meaning that I developed what you call hypnagogic hallucinations and a parasomnia. And what that has done for my sleep is it's affected everything going forward. My ability to get up in the morning, my ability to work and concentrate and focus. When you're not sleeping, you're not really productive. I don't care who you are. It's just how we are. We're human, and that's just how it is. So I've struggled with that, but escitalopram did help me relieve some of that anxiety and that stress, no question. But at the same time, I don't know if I want to be on pharmaceuticals the rest of my life. So I'm willing to try something different, and I think psychedelics has given me that hope to experiment and try and to build therapy into that routine so that I can benefit from a more natural and holistic way.
That's awesome, man.
And
I
you know what,
commend
and
you.
if it doesn't work, if I say I do a microdosing routine and regimen, if it doesn't work, then that's fine. That's fine. I think the difference we're trying to explain to people is this isn't just an all-out replacement of pharmaceuticals and in that context. What we're saying is let's have an option. If we have plant-based options that could potentially heal and help, then we have an obligation to give those a proper routine and try.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we've already done it in Canada here with CBD, right? Like there's a lot of people taking CBD for
Right.
sleep disorders, anxiety. So let's keep putting more options on the table. That's
Yeah.
all it is. It's not a cure-all. It's not a magic drug. I mean, it is a magic drug because I've been there and I've seen the magic, but
Yeah.
it's not like yeah, it's not a guarantee that like you do one psilocybin therapy session and you're good. There's a lot more that comes with it. It's a lot more work than just doing something like an SSRI, right?
Yeah.
SSRI helps suppress and manage some of those very difficult emotions that are coming up, but doesn't get to the root of solving why they're there in the first place. So,
No, it doesn't. And again, this is where I think we have an obligation as a society to, if we're going to talk about psychedelics and their healing potential, then we also have to talk about accessibility, because there are going to be millions of people throughout this world who could benefit from these treatments, but aren't going to be able to afford the treatments that could help them. And so I think that's even in my world, I don't have a benefit plan. I don't have $500, $600, to spend through an insurance plan on a psychologist or a counseling therapist. So that all comes out of pocket. So, there are ways that I think there's a lot of work that has to be done in that space to help the right people who need it most. And, I think you're looking at this generation of children who are already severely impacted by COVID, and what that's going to do to their future growth and development. We may never know, but it's going to, in the generations to come, have a severe impact.
yeah, we're all fundamentally changed after this 2 year
Absolutely.
experience of what we've been dealing with, right? And like
Right.
it hasn't been realized yet what the impact is, but we just know that there is a significant impact, and we're gonna need alternative tools to help us through,
Right.
something as like a collective trauma that we've all kind of been through here. Um, so one thing you shared with me before, which I found to be incredible, and I'm excited to do this myself, is in kind of trying to get to the root of figuring out your own anxiety and PTSD around losing your mother. You actually went to the hospital where she was in palliative care, and you got her medical records, which is, I would have never
Yeah.
thought to do that. And I really want to, because to help me understand, just beyond what she was telling us in
Yeah.
those last couple months, I want to see like what she was actually like off the cuff, the stuff that she didn't feel comfortable to share with her family, maybe too
Yeah.
dark, too scary. So tell
Yeah.
me about what you discovered there.
Um, the day she died on February 8th, 1992, I always knew that I wanted to tell that story. I wanted to share that story with with boys, with young men. Even more today, I think boys need to understand how important their relationships are with their mothers, with respect to understanding the complexities that we all face on an emotional and psychological level. So I always knew I was going to tell that story, and so in 2011, I'd called the hospital where my mother had gone through her final, through her diagnosis right through to the end, and I actually ordered her medical records, her health records from the hospital, and they gave them to me. I mean, it's freedom of information and access, because I'm a family member, so I could not just call up and say, hey, can I see Brett's mother's records? That's illegal. But so I received a package a couple of weeks after. Remember, it cost me $92 to access them because they had to print off all the papers, but it was certainly worth it. And, to this day, I was just looking at them again last night. To this day, it is probably the single most cathartic, therapeutic thing I've ever done, is to go back in time and really understand what was going through her mind, what was going through my father's mind, what was going through my mind, because I'm documented in those papers. And more importantly, how were the healthcare professionals around her treating her? What were they saying? Were they talking about her as just another patient, or was there empathy and compassion written in those notes? And I needed to see all of that. And every time I look at those records, it again is a just such an uplifting experience. So I plan to share those actually, and I plan to turn them into art, into an art display and exhibit down the road. I think the power of understanding grief and loss is really by going back and living in that moment, and having a broader perspective of how it has impacted our own lives. And so I can't say enough about, for those who really want to heal, get those records, learn, and understand where your parent, your mother, your father, whoever was going through, what they were going through at that time in history. And you'll come away sad, you'll come away maybe a little angry, but you'll feel better. And I know that because I've done it. So very powerful. Some of the stuff that was written, the day she was diagnosed, it was the 26th of July, 1991, and this happened. So within a month, she got really sick in June. Went back and forth with her doctor, and then she couldn't even lay down because the pressure was so bad, and her face had swelled up. And we had just been up to our property up north, northern Ontario, and we thought maybe she had been bitten by a black fly, or she had an allergic reaction to something. But she knew something was wrong. She knew. And so the day that she was diagnosed, is one that it's hard to explain, because for those who are listening will understand it, and for those who have gone through that experience will understand. But I remember when she told me what was going to happen and how devastating that was, but to see it actually written on paper, that when the doctor says, informed Mrs. Kydd of terminal C, her concern was, how am I going to tell my children? And that says a lot about a person and their character when they know they're going to die. They've been handed a life sentence. They've been handed, a time for them to go. Sorry, it's a bit emotional for me. Yeah. But and the only thing they could think of is, how am I going to tell my children? How are my children going to handle this? Um, so, so yeah, it's a tough thing, and yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to share with you that I can resonate to that from my experience as well. I think the stuff that I've worked through recently in losing my mom and revisiting that experience is feeling a lot of guilt of, like, was I a good son? Did I do enough for her? You know, like, was I there for her? Did she know how much I loved her? And to hear you say that, and the first thing that she thought about was, how am I going to tell my kids? It goes to show how much she, like, deeply loves and cares about you. So I can see the therapy of just being able to read that and know that, like, wow, I was the first thing that she thought about, like, you know, because that's something
Yeah,
I've dealt
it's
with a lot. Is like, how did she know how much? Like, did I tell her enough? Did I
yeah,
share that love authentically with her? Could she feel
yeah,
it? So yeah,
yeah, and I'm not one of those people who say, "Oh yeah, she knew." Like, don't worry, she knew, Brett. She knew that you loved her. Of course, she knew that. My mother knew that. Your mother knew that. But my uncle, I have an uncle who, back in the late 80s and early 90s, who got really obsessed with the old remember the big camcorders you put on your shoulders, and you're too young to remember, but I'm
I've seen
almost
movies.
48, so I do. But he went through a period where he was documenting everything, and he's done a fantastic job documenting my entire family's genealogy and history. But October 14th, 1991 was Thanksgiving Day. And my uncle had taken the camcorder, put it on a tripod, and set it up at the end of a long table we had in our rec room, and hit play. None of us knew that camera was on. I didn't even know there was a camera there recording
Fly on the wall. That's
hours
awesome.
of us just having our last Thanksgiving dinner together. And it was my both of my sets of my grandparents were there. My father, my sister, myself, my cousin, and her fiance at the time, and it was absolutely powerful, and still is, to go back and watch the sadness in the room. It's something I wish I could show to a health minister, to government, to other advocates, to say this is exactly what it does to a family when someone is dying, and they are giving up that quality of life because they're so depressed and so sad and in so much pain. But we have something that might be able to turn that dinner into something a little more happier, something that could really bring the family together, as opposed to nobody addressing the elephant in the room. And that's what it's always felt like. I watch my 17-year-old self walking back and forth, just not even acknowledging the situation, because I was in such a stage of denial and grief that I refused to acknowledge it. So, it's amazing to really think back and reflect on how much pain is involved, and the unilateral destruction of the nuclear family when you are dealing with a cancer diagnosis that is not going to end well. So I would argue that if we are looking at any form of regulation for psychedelic therapy, that it is absolutely needed. And I said it earlier, but it is absolutely needed in order to be able to provide that comfort and quality of life, because it's not just for the patient, it's for the family as well, because we carry that grief, decades after, and we pass that on to our children. There's so much destruction that comes from that, and there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love that happens too, but I believe to the core of my soul that psychedelic therapy, psilocybin therapy especially, um, is is a panacea to really ending some of that pain that could be passed on through successive generations.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about the ripple effect a lot, right? So it's, and you have no idea, like, whether it's negative or positive, really, like, what the impact is. Um, you can project, maybe hypothesize, if someone is carrying a severe amount of trauma and anxiety, that, like you said, there's obvious, there's silver linings that we carry as well, right? And, we're able to talk about this stuff and help people, but some people get so locked up through a traumatic episode like that it just destroys their life and potentially anybody's life that they're in contact with. So to not have this option, it's like, what is the ripple effect going out into the world of people carrying this trauma, that it's just so unnecessary with through 1 or 2 sessions of psilocybin therapy and some proper integration, and then family conversations, that you could mitigate so much damage, right? And like, what's I guess, like, the crazy question is, like, what's the risk when you look at the safety profile of psilocybin?
Right.
There's some risk, but it is so incredibly low for like what there is to gain.
And the science speaks to that. That's the, in the conversations I've had with government officials, whether political or on the bureaucratic side, they get that. They understand that. The question is one of policy and how far we can push that Overton window for public exception and really understanding and integrating that policy into the broader mainstream. And the fact is, there's still a lot of stigma around it. I get that from a communications angle and a pure societal health economics angle. But, at the same time, if we have something that has shown, very, very, very low risk for diversion and harm, people have said, well, let people who are wanting to access medical assistance and dying here in Canada, let them, give them psilocybin. Well, yes, I agree with that. I don't think we should just give it to them because they're dying and, here you go, you're dying anyway, so let's see how it works. How do you feel? No, they're not guinea pigs. We don't treat people like that. But what we do have is an obligation to say, you're facing this situation. A lot of the science already shows what you're probably feeling. We know that. Would you be interested? Would you help us by fighting for this cause so that we can pass that information on and help other people as we move forward? And you know what? I've met a lot of palliative and end-of-life patients, a lot over just this past year, but also throughout my life, and I can tell you every single one of them would say yes and have said yes. Wow. And to me, that is that's a game changer. We have to be, willing to continue to hammer that argument home with government that this isn't about diversion. This is about harm mitigation and taking away that risk. And the science already shows it. We don't need 1,000 more clinical trials. What we need is more evidence, whether that's anecdotal or more science. We do have to certainly invest in clinical trials, 100%, but we also have to be able to stand up and say, we already know what the positive impacts that are associated with these medicines. So let's do this. I think Health Canada is listening. I think we will see some significant change in the near future, but we're all still learning. You have to understand we're in difficult and strange times. There's politically, you could argue that Canadians are so divided right now. Americans are divided. Societies are divided. Yeah. So, we have to navigate through a lot of that infrastructure before we can really, really pinpoint, which policy will have the broadest and safest impact moving forward.
Yeah. So when you say, when you're talking to Health Canada officials and you're talking about this isn't diversion, by that, do you mean like we're not trying to find an alternative solution that's going to replace the current medical system? Is that what you're saying by diversion?
Well, it's part of it. So diversion is where the concern is if we put psilocybin into the hands of individuals through some form of regulated access, that those drugs could turn into escalated recreational use, or feeding the black or gray markets. So leading to potentially as a gateway to other drugs. None of that's true. None of that's true with psilocybin or MDMA for that matter. Like none of that is true.
Yeah, it's
If
this
anything,
is.
go ahead.
Sorry,
Sorry.
go.
I was
You
just
keep
if
going.
if anything, and I've had the privilege of being on calls with Paul Stamets talking about, and Dr. Pan Crisco, talking about safe supply and how if we don't do something on the legal, controlled, and regulated side to put these medicines into the hands of palliative and end-of-life patients through a proper regulated framework, then we're going to continue to see this black market expansion, especially as pop culture and media expand. We're going to more people learn about psilocybin and these modalities and these therapies. They're going to be curious. And as Paul Stamets so brilliantly said a few weeks ago on a call that I was on with him, is you're going to find someone who wants to forage, and they will go into a forest and they will pick a mushroom that they think is psilocybin, and they will consume that mushroom and get very, very sick or potentially die. Then we have a problem. Then we have a problem, especially if that stuff starts to circulate on the black market.
Absolutely, yeah. It just comes back to education and access, and what I was going to say there too is like it sounds like it's that same faulty thinking that has been used for so long in the war on drugs, right? It's just like a deep insecurity and fear that if we like let the beast out of the cage, like it's going to be havoc, and it's like, well, we already have havoc. Like it's like an ignorance to the current reality that everybody uses drugs, everybody wants to get their hands on drugs, and if they don't have a safe access or method of doing that from a trusted source, the risk goes through the roof, right? So yeah, I don't know when that shift is going to happen, where we need to get out of that paradigm of war on drugs thinking and mentality, but like it's very clear, I think, to most people it hasn't worked. It's not working.
I don't. And look, I don't think we'll ever see a full shift on the war on drugs, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the best thing. Like I think we have to be careful. I'm not. I'm not one to propose. Hey, let's just legalize drugs. Decriminalization is a whole different matter. I think what the war on drugs has done is it has definitely marginalized vulnerable populations, and look for mass incarceration by race, and you look at a lot of that stuff, and the socioeconomic data there is clear as day what the war on drugs has caused. But at the same time, we have to be careful with what we are consuming, which again, why it's so important to have a legally controlled product that is grown within the country, that is produced and supplied within the country under GMP certified standards that everybody can embrace and learn from and grow data from, so that we can all heal together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just in the psychedelic side right now, there's a lot of microdosing companies popping up
All over the place.
that are just doing it, and they're growing this stuff in their closet, and then they're making it in their kitchen, and it's
It is.
it's not the most comforting thing to ingest.
Yeah, I must get 10 requests a day on Twitter from people. Hey, do you want to buy? And I'm like, guys, like, come on, it's not. I get what you're doing, but it just doesn't work that way for me. So
yeah, there you go. We gotta put some structures in place so that because entrepreneurs are gonna entrepreneur, right? They see an
Oh, of
opportunity,
course.
right? They're going to go for it, and that's great. But let's give them a structure and a framework to work through. It's going to slow them down, obviously, but again, it's about mitigating risk. So I'm all for that as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, when we talk about the relations side, government relations, and how you're having these conversations, weed's been legal for 4 years now in Canada, almost 3.5, I think, right? I believe it was October 2018. So, what data do we have there? Do you know anything? Can you speak to that? Because that's to me is like, are all of these fears about decriminalizing psychedelics?
Yeah.
If we have 3.5 years of data now of decriminalizing, legalizing marijuana for medical and recreational use,
Yeah.
what's the story telling us there, and how can we use that for psychedelics?
Well, I don't have the data, but what I can tell you though is, as we venture into regulatory territory with psychedelics, a lot of people are looking at the processes that were put in place through the legalization of medicinal cannabis from 2515 to 2018. Sorry, 2015 to 2018. And, there's a lot of people point the finger back to that specific time because, when Justin Trudeau came in and promised that in the 2015 election that he would legalize cannabis, everybody got excited. It was recreational. This is progressive. This is the right time, and maybe it was. It's not for me to really speculate on that, but what I can tell you is that a lot of people in the medical research side of cannabis had a very difficult time because they felt that the research still wasn't there, that there was so much more work that needed to be done, that still to this day needs to be done. So they were forgotten. And the focal point became about getting it into stores as a retail option so that consumers can purchase the product and government can make its money off taxation. Like it's a classic supply and demand economic issue with but it kind of ran over what the purpose for a lot of the advocacy work over the last 100 years in this country and other countries around cannabis legislation is, that it's to be used for medicinal purposes and the power of what that drug can actually do to help those. Ask veterans today who consume enormous amounts of cannabis, CBD, about how it's affecting them, and a lot will tell you that it's been powerful. But what's happened with psychedelics is that we're taking our time. Yes, we want some form of regulated access, but we're taking our time because we don't want to make those mistakes, the same mistakes that were made. We don't want to forego the research. So one of the things that I do in my conversations with Health Canada and with my clients who are working on clinical trials as we speak and building GMP compliant facilities, is helping Health Canada understand that we're not going to go down that road. Psychedelics are different. Doctors were kind of blindsided with cannabis. We're working to educate more doctors today. That's why I thought the special access program was a really, really good move from Health Canada, not just because of the supply and being able to get more patients access, but because it's an opportunity to further educate physicians and clinicians and other practitioners on why psychedelic therapy is important. So we're taking our time. It's a bit of give and take, but I think we've come to that point now where if we can ensure that the doctors understand, that Health Canada understands that we're still very much committed to clinical trials and research to further develop psilocybin as a really good therapeutic modality, then everybody's going to be better off. What you're seeing now today, though, Brett, is, and if you talk to someone like Robert LaPrairie, who's probably one of the best cannabis researchers in the country out of the University of Saskatchewan. He had a lot to do with the current cannabis regulations, especially on the MMPR, so the medicinal side. Um, yeah, he will tell you that it's actually kind of cycled back now, where government is now saying, yeah, you know what, we need to invest more money into medicinal cannabis and really understanding that. So there's more attention being paid to it. Everyone seems to look at cannabis and say, "Oh, look at the stock values of complaints. It stinks. Nobody's, they're pulling all their capital out. It was speculative to begin with, but that's business. That's economics. That's okay." Where for those who really care about healing, um, it's nice to see some of that money going back into research, because that is critical for the longevity and sustainability of any of these drugs and compounds as we move forward.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I never really thought about it in that light with cannabis, of the mistakes that were made of speeding through the medicalization of cannabis and trying to get to the recreational, tax revenue generating side of it. And and yeah, I understand that now. That's an interesting perspective. I really want to talk to Robert LaPrairie as well to get his thoughts on.
Yeah, happy to make that introduction for you.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, because
Yeah,
one question, I'm not a big consumer of cannabis. I have a THC tincture that I take a little bit and some CBD
yeah,
products. Um, but one thing I have had a lot of conversations. I just had a conversation with a friend on the weekend, and he took he took 50 milligrams of a THC gummy, and it just like put him into a state of dread and psychosis for 6 hours straight, right? And like that's a common story that we've all had. So it's like I think we did miss the
yeah,
education and the specifically with ingesting THC, because
yeah,
it's a whole different beast for people, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
he even told me his wife had to call call the emergency line because like he thought he was gonna die, right?
yeah,
And they're kind of laughing about it on the other side because it's such a common phone call that they get of
yeah.
people overdosing on THC edibles, right? So
Well, it's funny. Prior to May of 2019, I'd never touched cannabis,
hmm
and I was, I can't give specific details, but I was in Ottawa on business, and my client at the time, we were taking an Uber back to the airport. She was going to one part of the country. I was coming back to Halifax, and she said, "You want a piece of chocolate?" And I said, "Sure." Is it an edible? She said, "Yeah." I said, "You know what? Absolutely. I've never done this before, but I want to try it." So I took one, and I'm in the front seat, and everything's good. And I looked back and said, "Nothing's happening. Give me another one." She said, "No, no, no. You don't want another one." I said, "Yes." I demanded it. She gave me one. And by the time I picked my bag up and walked into the terminal, um, it was over.
oh
It was over.
no.
I sat in that terminal. I missed my flight. She missed her flight, and I laughed for 2 hours straight. But when I did finally get my flight figured out hours later, um, that's when if it was just I went from a complete euphoria to utter dread. It was a horrible feeling. So, anyways, that was my first experience as well, and but yeah, you learn, right?
You learn, and unfortunately a lot of people are learning the hard way with
They
THC
are.
edibles.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
that's again, to go back to psychedelics and diversion. Uh, that is a concern, and it's a
hmm
legitimate concern. I've spoken with a lot of, especially on the conservative side, I've spoken to a lot of conservative politicians who have said, we're concerned that these drugs will end up in the wrong hands, and people will abuse any type of regulated access. And again, we can only explain the science as much as we know it, and we definitely need to have more science. We know there's no risk of diversion, but we still need to continue to push that narrative forward and that message forward, because it's so important.
hmm
And again, I think back to my mom, and when she was diagnosed, and I remember she asked our family doctor, what is there anything on the alternative? Like, there's their alternative therapy because everybody always uses that term, right? What can I go to Mexico? Can I go to Jamaica? Is there something experimental? And I mean, we wouldn't have had the money to do it anyway. There was no GoFundMe back then, right?
Right.
So the doctor handed her a bottle of green pills and just said, "These are greens. They're probably not going to help you, but just, you know, I think it was more of a psychological trick than anything."
Were they
So,
placebos?
you
What
know,
were they?
yeah, it's tough. It's tough because I'd love to. It's that old question of if you could go back in time to do anything, you know, you'd want to have that 1 hour, that 1 minute with someone that you lost. And I would. I'd go back to my mom, and there's a lot of things that I'd say, a lot of things I would have done different. You know, kind of like what you said earlier. You know, was I there? Did I do enough? And I ask those questions of myself, you know, every single day. Um, but you know, at the end of the day, I'll tell you this. Um, I would I would be. Uh, it was so traumatic to be a 17-year-old boy waking up every morning to get ready for school and to walk out of your room and head towards the kitchen, and you know, peripherally you could kind of see around the kitchen into our living room. We had a big bay window there, and I would always see a little bit of commotion, just a little bit of movement, and I'd just peek my head around the corner, and I'd see my mom sitting in her rocking chair. I was in her house coat. She had lost her hair, and she'd be in that rocking chair, just slowly going back and forth, and looking out at the sunrise. And the one regret I have is that I never walked up behind her and just talked to her and said, "Hey, tell me how you're feeling. What's going on?" That's a regret I have. But at the same time, I already knew what she was thinking. And I wanted to give her those moments to herself that she was probably trying to answer a lot of questions. Was she talking to God? Was she talking to, I don't know. Like it's one of those life's mysterious things that you never ever get to know. But so again, you think back to how psychedelics could have potentially been instead of there being a barrier of communication in our household, maybe psychedelics could have helped dissolve that a little bit and brought us closer to understand exactly what she was feeling. We know what somebody, somebody who's dying, what they're feeling. We can feel that anxiety, but it's the empathy. It's the understanding that this is going to happen, and we have to work together as a family and as friends to help one another. And to me, that's the most powerful thing about having lost a mother so young, is to now be able to take that and meet with different palliative patients and end of life patients and fight every morning that I get up now and fight for them to get access, whether they believe in it or not, to give them that choice, that right to be able to open up their feelings and communicate on a level that they may have never ever or would have never experienced with their family as they pass off into at the end of their journeys. So to me, that's the most powerful thing and why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Man, I'm right there with you, man. That's everything. We all just want to be able to feel comfortable to open up to the people that matter most to us, right? And psychedelics are an incredible gateway to allow that to happen.
They are. I say this as a guy who's, once thought he was a hamster, but I do. I wish, I think, and I think back to my father, the impact it the grief and despair it could have saved him. My mother was the rock, probably much like you, Brett. My mother was the rock of our family.
Yep.
She
100%.
was the boss. She was the boss, and we knew that. Everybody. She had, 5 sisters, 3 brothers. Everyone knew that my mom was the boss. We're talking about a lady who, my goodness, it's probably good she's not around for minor hockey these days, because she would start brawls in stands. But she had the love and respect of everybody. Like, didn't matter. We were 10 years old watching our parents in a full-out brawl in stands, and yet people still loved her because she was a little tough Italian lady, right? And she fought hard. I just wish we could have given her something more to really understand and deal with her grief.
Yeah.
A lot better.
Yeah. It's like having being able to open that door to help her too, right?
Yeah.
That's the big thing, is like you feel so helpless when something like that happens. I remember
You
just
know
being
what?
like, there's nothing like I can do. Like I felt in my own prison as well, right? It's
Yeah.
like I want to fix this. I want to make her pain and suffering go away. And talking to a lot of different people, started educating myself, and found some alternative stuff about like diet shifts and meditation and stuff, which we tried, but it was like it just didn't seem like we were getting there. We weren't getting breakthroughs, and yeah, it's just everyone just kind of locked up, and it was like, well, all the doctors are just telling us that
Yeah.
it's over, and it's we like to speak in months instead of years, and then it was like we like to speak in weeks instead of months, and it was just like everything was just closing in on us, and no one
Yeah.
knew what to do.
Yeah, I remember that well, my friend. I'll share one last story with you here.
Yeah,
I was playing junior hockey, and as I said, my mom never missed any of my hockey games. She did when she was sick, and which it is what it is. But she had my dad had brought her up to my game, and he pushed her in with the wheelchair. And I remember everybody kind of just went quiet because we were losing 3-1. I was a goalie. We were losing 3-1, and I just remember looking up to my left and seeing my dad wheel her in, and everybody was quiet, and he brought her over, and then the play had resumed, and about an hour later, she could only handle so much, so she had to go home, and I remember everybody in the rink was quiet. There's probably 500-600 fans in the rink at the time, and I remember my dad saying, "Okay, Marion," to my mom, "say bye to Michael." And I remember looking up, and she mouthed the word. She was so weak at this time. She said, "Bye, Michael," like that to me. And I remember I just broke down on the ice. And the boys came back, and we won 5-3. But it's amazing, because when I went home that night, I walked in, and my dad said, "Hey, how'd you guys make out?" I said, "We ended up winning." And I said, "How's mom?" He said, "She doesn't have much. She doesn't have much to go, right? Longer to go." I said, "Yeah, I saw it tonight, Dad." He said, "Why don't you go in there and lay down with her and just let her know that you're there?" And it was other than having access to her health records, it was my way to start to break free from some of that grief and denial, because I laid there, and I remember rubbing her back, and she was coherent. She was in a lot of pain, and we just talked for a bit, and she fell asleep. And I knew at that moment, after an hour or so after she fell asleep, when I walked out, I knew it wouldn't be long after that, and she was gone within a few days. And so, I think that's the key, is that I think where psychedelics could potentially help is making those moments a lot more powerful, and giving us that opportunity for clarity and empathy, and just walking everybody to the end together, as opposed to letting someone go and telling them, we hope to see you again. And that's a tough thing to do without that strong, powerful connection to spirit. And I believe that we could do that through psilocybin therapy. There's no question in my mind, from what I've seen, who I've talked to, and a lot of the research that's out there.
Couldn't agree with you more, man. Thank you so much for sharing that story. That listening to someone like yourself as well that's gone through this at a younger age and with more years after it is a lot of therapy for me as well. So I just want to share that with you, that listening to this and seeing the parallels of our experience, super helpful. So I really appreciate you sharing the story. And there's so many of our listeners out there too that I'm sure have been through a similar experience, and I know that they always get a lot of value out of this. So it's important to keep sharing that story. And I know this is the first time that you've really shared it on a platform like this outside of a blog. So
It is. Yeah.
thanks for your courage to share it as well.
Well, you know what, Brett, I thank you for having, using this technology to share all kinds of different stories. And I think if you got something out of this today, that means a lot to me, because again, it's another step forward to bringing people together to understand that grief isn't something we deal with alone. That whether you're on the opposite side of the world to me, there's always a connection with things that we have in common, whether it's the death of a parent, the loss of a child, whatever. We have to help and work with each other. So big kudos to you, my friend. Keep doing a great job, and thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. And just before we sign off here, I'm absolutely going to call the hospital where my mom was diagnosed.
Oh man, I can't wait.
Treatment days. Yeah, and I'd love to share those notes with you as well, and compare notes and just see and have another healing session with you, my man. That's going to be, it's scary and exciting, and I'm a little afraid of what I'll see. But one thing I've learned in years of therapy and work is that not knowing is so much more torture than just like facing the difficult things, right? Yeah. So it's just to push through that, and knowing that you've done it and you've gone through it helps me to kind of to face that as well. And is there anything you'd like to tell people about the work you're doing, or what they can personally do in their own to help? Yeah,
I think just continue to communicate respectfully with parliamentarians. Just talk to them. If you see them out of the grocery store, you bump into them at an event, wherever, just talk to them. Say, hey, are you aware of this? And most of them will say, I've heard about it, I've read something about it. But just have the conversation. If you have an experience of your own, continue to talk about it. I will leave you this last thought too. When you do get your mother's health records, it'll be a very defining moment for you, because I know now that as I look at them under the psychedelic lens, I know I'm looking for key words, and a lot of the words I don't understand. I have a couple friends who are doctors, so I may have them translated for me because I don't understand. I've been Googling a lot of the words, so I'm starting to put it together. But I'll tell you, the one word that was consistent throughout all of those documents was anxiety. Mrs. Kydd didn't want to have her chest x-ray because she was too anxious. Missed appointment because of anxiety. Like, this is exactly why we need to have psilocybin assisted psychotherapy, to help people deal with these complex issues around death. So I welcome your experience, and I'm looking forward to you sharing that with everyone who's listening. So all the best to you, my friend, and people, keep fighting, keep up the good work, and don't turn into a hamster. That's all I ask.
Beautiful. Thank you so much again, Michael.
All right, man. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week's episode, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate all you guys being here on this educational journey with us all. If you want to continue your education around the art, science, and business of psychedelics, I highly recommend you sign up for our newsletter. Just go over to dailymushroom.co, pop in your email, and every Friday you'll get a newsletter straight to your inbox that keeps you up to date on everything happening in the world of psychedelics. You can also follow us on Instagram at dailymushroom.co and TikTok at dailymushroom.co. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the other side.